My name is Dan Boutin. I'm from SOASTA, and I've probably got the loudest mic in the building. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to talk today about, it's not called continuous integration for nothing. Now, probably wondering, what does that title mean? I'm sure you read the abstract and thought, what does that title have to do with that abstract? So what I'm actually going to walk through today is, I'm from a company called SOASTA. We're a performance analytics, performance testing company, and I'm going to walk you through what we look at when we looked at continuous integration and how it can help us build a product in the market. So we're unique here. We're a vendor that doesn't have, we don't offer a product for sale in this space. Really what I'm going to be talking about is best practice, and then a lot of things that are underneath that go into continuous integration that somehow when you cut through everything, the whole marketplace is a lot about buzzwords. I hear continuous integration, continuous delivery, DevOps. Well, what really does that mean? And what are the critical pieces of it? And what did we look at first in our conveyor belt of really software development? So what I'm going to go through today, I'm an introduction, one slide of what we do and why speed's important to us. And then I'm going to talk about the need for continuous and what we see the benefits are. And you'll probably nod your head through that whole section because it's something that everyone in the marketplace is well aware of. And then I'm going to talk about the big three, what they are, what they do, why they're important to continuous integration and DevOps, and why they're probably the most important critical components to any development lifecycle. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about configuration in CI with mobile and performance. And I'm actually going to walk you through a little bit as to what we do and how we were able to do 454 product releases last year. Think about that number for a minute, 3 products, that's a lot. So we do quite a bit of continuous testing, continuous integration, and I will walk through that today. So SOASTA, what we do, and we have a booth out there, you can see this later. The company's been around since 2006, started as a performance testing company. We've performed over 10 million tests from the cloud since 2008. That's quite a few tests. And user experiences, we actually have tested over 100 billion user experiences since our product in that space launched, I'm going to say 2.5 years ago. So we're very aware of user experience, how that relates to continuous integration, how that relates to performance, and how that relates back to continuous integration. In our mind, it's all about the user. So that's the SOASTA introduction. I got my one slide. So the need for continuous, the next section, I mean, what's not to like about continuous integration, right? You can do it in small batches. It fits very well in the agile stream. You want to get things out to market, get them evaluated, get revenue in, and then rinse, lather, repeat, and keep building upon that process. You want to be able to have comprehensive version control. You heard this during the keynote this morning if you were in this big room. That was one of the big items that was covered was importance of version control. You want to be able to have simple branch strategies. Don't want to make things complex. This isn't a complex object-oriented airline you're building. It's essentially just software. You want to be able to automate where it makes sense. I always tell people, automate the simple stuff first, because that ends up being the repetitive, time-consuming where errors can be made. You want to have a continuous feedback loop. If I'm doing a release and I'm measuring performance of that release, I want to measure it against a previous release. Did something get faster? Did something get slower? If it did get slower, I want to change that back to where it was or improve upon it. And I want to make sure that goes all the way back through the development cycle to the original requirements, business, developer. And then emphasis on working builds. I want to be able to have that assembly line continuously moving. I want to have consistent environments because if they're not, when I go to test and release, if something has changed, chances are something will slip through, something will fail. If it's different, you can rest assured at some point it'll pop up. And the important part that I like is developers and testers with continuous integration become really best friends. Now maybe they're already that way in some of the agile worlds, but in this, with continuous integration, you almost have to be. So the big three, what is it? Well, with the NBA season, just anyway, first of all, what's been missing? And really, if you look at continuous integration, what's been missing to me is the focus on 3 major processes that really touch the entire life cycle. And the big 3, I call them the big 3. Cleveland lost the other night, so that was the new big 3. But really, was it the Miami Heat? No. not so much. This played really well in Miami, by the way, but the booze never stopped after the Cleveland slide. But I'm actually from Boston. The original Big Three was Bird, Parrish, and McHale, right? That will always be the Big Three. And for those that need a more current history lesson, we have the 2008 Big Three from Boston. But since we're in this venue talking about CI and software development, we'll have to put those three aside. And let's talk about what the Big Three is, but first I want to put everything into context around DevOps. So let's break down DevOps. Where is the process broken? Is it broken inside development? Is it broken inside test? Is it broken inside operations? I argue no. In the first tower, I'll give everyone who's a developer the nod that, hey, you're great coders. You do your job really, really well. Why? Because it's all in that tower. I can define how I do it, when I do it, how fast, what language, everything. If I go into testing, I could say the same thing about testing within the functional domain, unit domain, UAT domain. If I go in operations, I have never been in a NOC that doesn't have performance monitoring, application performance monitoring, and all the processes just a heartbeat away. It's when things start to go across those silos where things break down, and that's why you hear DevOps. That's because DevOps doesn't have the word test in it, which kind of boggles me to this day. But so it's about the relationships between these three silos. Anybody know where this is? I always give away a prize if anybody knows where this is. This is an actual farm. Nobody? I'll give you an opportunity to send me, and I'll send you a phone charger if you know where it is. So the three silos, essentially, continuous integration is all about the touch points between the silos. And there are a couple of them. To keep your life cycle going, you've got a touch point between application development and QA, actually 3 of them, 4 of them if I really point home, and then between QA and test, same thing. Those are where the problems usually lie, because we're going from one area of an organization that's been built to the next, and so on. So the focus lines and the Big Three really between, I have development and test here, but the same applies to test to operations. The Big Three are configuration management, release management, and change management. And I could say it's a Big Four with performance management, and I'm going to touch on performance in a little bit and why that should be part of that discussion. But really, when you're building a product that you're taking to market, those 3 processes are key to anything. You need to be able to understand change management is nothing more than what am I building and where did it come from? Did it come from a new business requirement, or did it come from a ticket from operations where somebody called and complained about something, or did it come from a bug during a test? Those are the 3 ways that changes get kicked off. Well, a change really leads to some work being done, and that leads to a what? A configuration. The configuration then gets put together in a bill of materials, tested, and then released. Those 3 together, they span all 3 of the silos, and they're like a 3-legged bar stool. You essentially saw off one of the legs, and you're going to fall off the bar stool. So those 3 really, in my opinion, are what continuous integration is all about. And that's really the way we look at it at SOASTA. And I'm going to get into the performance management piece as well. So think of software, and I do. I mean, we get shipped something from Amazon, what's on a box? A bill of materials. It talks about every single thing that's in it. Well, the software should be no different, and really it's not. So what you really need to look at is that software really is your conveyor belt. And you want to get it from the point where you're doing everything manually and lots of handoffs, which leads to errors and rework, to something more along the lines of on the right, where you're doing more automation, more linkage between the handoffs. So that way you essentially don't have a broken conveyor belt. So what? So why is continuous integration critical? Speed and time to market is everything, and we can attest to that as a software company. The quicker we get something to market as a feature, the quicker it's going to generate revenue, brand recognition, customer satisfaction. I see it in every vertical I go into, whether it's retail, whether it's banking. It could be something as simple as a differentiator where maybe you're developing an app and you've figured out a way to have people buy from your site a lot easier than somebody else. And I can give you an example because I do this all the time. Any of you here Amazon Prime members? A lot of everybody? Now, if you know that you're going to buy an item, whether it's a book, a movie, or whatever, isn't it a lot more simple to just go and do a one-click on Amazon than to go shopping and do a 20-step somewhere else, even if it's to save a nickel? Right? That's one of their differentiators. I'll admit that I do it. And that's a go-to-market speed. That's a perfect example of making an app user experience friendly and generating revenue as quickly as possible. They're masters at it. So I always give that example. So the conveyor belt, and I don't know, you'll probably have to YouTube this. This is the old Lucille Ball show where they were, her and I think it's Ethel, were doing chocolates, and the conveyor belt was moving at a certain speed and they couldn't keep up. Well, the conveyor belt, we can only test as fast as that conveyor belt moves, but if you're doing agile and doing sprints and you're doing faster and faster releases, well, unfortunately, Lucille kind of doesn't keep up. And that's what usually happens because test is the one that becomes, quote, the bottleneck. And then I hear things like healthcare.gov, where Kathleen Sebelius got up in front of Congress and said, "We just didn't have time to test." Come on. I love that comment. I usually have that slide up here, but I was in Washington, so I wasn't sure how that would go up. But the big three really drives the life cycle. And the more you automate that, the more you have those three processes down as the most solid throughout the life cycle and everybody on the same page with those three, you're going to get the most bang for the buck out of that. So what I'm going to show you now is a little bit is how things have changed. I don't know how many of you here are familiar with the OSI model. Anybody? I thought most everybody would be. It looks a lot like an organization in a lot of IT operations shops too, doesn't it? We have the network team, the database team, applications team, all the different layers. And one of the things that I always used to say from a performance perspective is each one of those was assigned. If I used to go into organizations and they'd have the knock up and it would say, "Oh, we're 5 nines." Really? You're 5 nines, but you were down 20% of the time last week. How can you be 5 nines? And you'd have the network guy, "I'm 5 nines. I'm 5 nines. I'm 5 nines." The problem is when you put those on top of each other like that, and the network guy said, "Well, I was down from midnight to 2." And then the transport layer guy or application guy said, "Well, yeah, we did an upgrade from 2 to 4. All of a sudden you add them all up, draw a line on the bottom, and there's your sum total is 80%. Well, that's what the users experience. That's why you've got a lot of tickets open. That's why your revenue's down. So you're not really 5 nines. And when you dig under that, it's those three processes that are the root cause of why you essentially don't get to 5 nines. One of the things that really has gone on in the industry, whoops, didn't mean to do that, is performance testing over the past 20 years has been something that is all around writing scripts, spending a lot of time writing scripts, and then a little bit of time essentially running a test. And the entire market has gone towards concentration of writing scripts for performance testing. And that's because of the tools that have been available over the past 25 years. That's what they do. I've gone into organizations where I had somebody tell me, "Hey, you know what? My test organization is an SCI level 3. Really? Maybe you should move your test organization into the development station, group, because they're not level 3 and they're giving you guys a lot of bugs." Why do you need to be a development organization in a test arena? Really, what you want to be able to do is test fast. Writing code is not something that's fast. And you want to be able to execute tests the more you can during a window. Like Kathleen Sebelius said, didn't have time to test because they didn't have time to code the tests. So performance engineering these days is about testing, but it's about those three processes, getting those correct, and then managing them with traditional IT operations processes like capacity management, like performance management, scalability, those kinds of processes you see in the bigger institutions, the bigger banks, that they're behind the scenes, but they're still there. Those guys all get married into the change release configuration process, but it's engineering. And the reason for that is because the OSI model on the right, that's not what it looks like now. And I kind of gave it away already. This is what it looks like. This is actually an architecture map from one of my customers. So pretty complex looking thing, pretty big beast. You've got to be able to manage the big three with that kind of an environment because it is all about speed, and that's what keeps it running. So I think I talked about that. So just laying the foundation a little bit. A factory kind of streamlines things, and a lot of what you want to look at when you're doing essentially putting all your software bill of materials and your work together is, yes, you want to assemble it, and really what you're doing is, does it work as it's designed? Does it perform under extreme conditions? Lots of users, bandwidth, different connectivity. What actually happens when people use it? And then, obviously, you go through that whole cycle. You want to look at what are people that are doing that are really using your app. We've done some examples where, I think I've got some of them later on, but one thing we see a lot of is a lot of people in the performance space say, or sit in a room and they talk about, I'm going to design test cases and here's how people are going to use it. They're going to go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. Go to the web page, do a search on a product, select what I want, color, pants, size, put it in my cart, same thing. And what we see happening is the site's not used that way. Maybe somebody goes, step 1, step 3, step 5, step 4, step 2. And we didn't test that and it breaks. But the only way you know that that alternate path is being used is essentially to know what the users are doing. And in this lifecycle, using essentially data that comes from real user experiences and folding that into test cases, folding that back into your change management, because you want to be able to change the application or their website to be able to run the way users are using it, because that's, if they found a way to use it like the Amazon one-click that's getting you more revenue, then that's what you should do. You need to keep that competitive advantage, because if you don't do it, somebody else will. So if we tie this to software, it's really building it, doing your change management, your requirements management, getting a functional validation. You want to be able to ensure that it performs properly. You don't want to overload it. You don't want it to tip over, because if it tips over, you end up on Twitter where somebody says, this application went down and I wasn't able to, I do it all the time. I travel a lot, and if you have my Twitter, I guarantee you at least once a week I'm going to tweet something not so nice about Delta Airlines. Because if I'm boarding a plane and I can't get my mobile boarding pass, they won't let me on. So, and I tweet that a lot because it doesn't work on an iPad. Works great on a phone, not so hot on an iPad. And they follow me on Twitter, so that's another long story. But what actually happens, and then again, what real users are doing, and you cycle through that. And I'm actually going to overlay what we do in our life cycle in a second here as well. So CI with mobile and performance test. So our life cycle, it's going to simplify it a little bit here. So it really starts, it says I just made a code change, but that's the change management piece. I'm going to get a change from one of 3 places. I'm going to get a change from a customer request, a feature enhancement. I'm going to get a change from a new requirement, or I'm going to get a change from an open ticket or a bug or some kind of feature breakage. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run some functional tests to make sure it got tested properly. Yes, we use Jenkins, and I'll actually show you some screenshots in the process flow in a second here. We spin up our tests in the cloud. We're a SaaS model, so we don't want to be the big data center that you saw in the keynote where you had three buildings there. We just spin up when we need it, and we spin it back down when we don't need it. You want to be able to run load tests, which we do. You want to be able to determine, can it perform? Is the truck going to tip over, the ship sink, or whatever? Did the site go down and no revenue? If you're looking at mobile, I want to be able to look at mobile. I want to be able to look at the types of devices, operating systems, and browsers all my users are using. I want to prioritize those, and I want to test those on the actual devices. I want to automate as much testing as I can, automate the simple tests that you can repetitively do, like in an agile environment. When you build feature upon feature with those building blocks, you keep that repetition until the stream changes so much where you go back and you have to essentially start from scratch. But you want to be able to run those, again, on the real devices. But the key thing you don't want to lose focus of on a mobile, it's not about the device. In this market, I see a lot about, we support this device, we support that device. That's great, that's fantastic. In the 90s, I didn't say, oh, I had a Dell laptop or an IBM laptop. It was about the application. that focus should still be on the application. Because ultimately, even though there are some minor quirks between devices, and you've got to allow for screen sizes and different resolution and different Wi-Fi and network emulation, it still comes down to, is the app doing what I need it to do? Is it being used the way I think it's being used? And does it perform the way it should perform? Not just on the device, but the app itself. That focus shouldn't get lost. And we realized that, pretty early on in the mobile game. And then what I want to know is, when I'm running these tests live, if they're performance tests, I want to know exactly what's going on. Don't hide the truth. I want to compare current release to previous release because I want to know functionally, did something change? Did something break? Should I look at, on the functional side, including more edge cases? Should I automate more so I can include more edge cases? On the performance side, is it running faster than the previous release did? Because I need it to run faster because my competitors are running faster. We've done analysis, and a lot of our customers have provided us the data as well, that just a half second in page load time increases revenue in some cases by, multitude of millions of dollars for large revenue sites. But just that breakage point between, I'm not waiting anymore, I'm going to go and buy it somewhere else, the one click, we're a fast society. And then I've mentioned it a couple of times already, manage to a baseline. As I'm doing releases and we run tests, we actually compare the current baseline functionally and performance-wise against previous baselines. I think we go 5 back. That's an example, I think, of one of them that actually look like. I want to know that if I added any functionality, I changed any content, maybe I made, put a bigger image on a page than I had before. I want to know if that page is going to load okay. I want to make sure that it hasn't slowed down any. And the examples I give in this case, any of you here monitor like any of the news pages, like a CNN or Fox News, CNN Online. If you look at whenever they do breaking news, and they're famous for monitoring and throttling their performance, a lot of times if it's just a normal business day, on the front page of CNN will be videos. It'll be the first thing you see. It'll be the video of the day, the story of the day. But when there's breaking news, take a look at the content that's on the page. You'll actually see a lot of it peeled back. And the reason for that is they lighten the page loads because they know more people are going to be hitting it. Breaking news, some big event, so you'd see a lot of those videos taken down. And that'll stay like that until the event is not broken. You'll see the stuff go back up. News organizations, you want to talk about folks that have to release fast? That's a perfect example, because some of the content on a lot of the big, whether it's newspapers or even the TV stations here, I know you got a big media conglomerate right up the street here, but their content changes about every 2 hours. So talk about a release cycle and having to manage change, manage config, and architect around a template so your content can be changed and tested fast, because if you don't break that story, someone else is going to. And then finally, I've mentioned the real user data. You want to take that data and iterate that back into the development team. So in an agile environment, there's a role, all of you know agile, and that there's a role called the UX, user experience. A lot of times when I read all about agile, it's all about the performance role is really usability, human factors. It's not about performance. The UX role in agile, this is the data that should go back into that agile team for the next stream. It's really performance of the application and the way the user's using it. That needs to be added as a best practice, and that's what we do. We look at how people are using it, the speed. We get the feedback from the actual product being used and from the test, and we feed that back into the organization. So here's an actual example. This is actually a screenshot of our product called CloudTest, which is our performance testing tool. If you look on the upper right, you can see, well, maybe, but we do on average about two major builds a day. We run on the builds for each product. We have 3 main products, well 4 now, we just announced another one. But we do 2 builds for each of the 3 sets of products. And I'm gonna actually drill in a little bit. So this is one we're actually doing a mobile build. And what we do is we have the functional tests built inside so that we can actually kick off the build and actually run the tests automatically. In this particular case, if you drill down, we have a set that we had 36 failures here. I want to be able to drill down, see what they were, I want all the failed tests. I want to be able to actually drill down a little, which ones passed, which ones failed. And then we actually kick off our product to actually see what the test results are so that we can actually look at what exactly failed, fix it, remediate, change, release, config, and conveyor belt speeding up for poor Lucille Ball. And then what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to kick off and run the regression tests so that they pass. And all this is done at the conveyor belt speeding up faster and faster, all inside Jenkins. And then when all the tests are passed, you can actually see that the top one there got essentially is a promotion release candidate ready to go. And we do this for 3 products, again, usually twice a day, sometimes a little more, depending on where we are in the development cycle. But so for our takeaways, we have 3 main products. We run about 8,000 tests a day. For mobile, we do about 300 automated functional tests, and these are all functional tests, by the way, for iOS and Android. We did, I think I mentioned earlier, 454 builds last year. This is June. I just got the numbers yesterday. I think for the 3 products, I think we're up to 120, 130, and they're pretty evenly broken down between the 3 products. So what we do is if we get bugs that are coming in, we prioritize them and we go ahead and fix them and get them out as fast as we can. Our goal, as a company internally in the engineering team, it's quality first. And the goal is when we look at every Monday we have the engineering meeting, that number should be 0. 0 priority 1, 0 priority 2, and the priority 3 should be worked off and kept low. So our takeaways from this, understand your requirements, because change control is all about requirements, right? Whether it's a feature from the business or from engineering or a request from a customer or even a bug that needs to be fixed. You want to identify advantages the cloud may have for you. I think this morning I heard Amazon has 450,000 servers. They are the biggest. I think if you put everybody together behind them, they still don't add up to Amazon. But you've got all that infrastructure there to be able to do more testing. You shouldn't have to sit with Kathleen and say, I didn't have time to test, or I didn't have the infrastructure to test. You want to automate the obvious and the most critical. And the obvious to me is the simple stuff, the repetitive stuff. I chuckle when I hear somebody say, oh, I use crowdsourcing. Really? So my 10-year-old's on the other end doing your testing. Hopefully that'll work for you, but I'm not a big fan of crowdsourcing. But from an automation perspective, automate the simple, repetitive stuff, especially if you look at it from an agile stream perspective. It's going to be something you put in that first building block, and you're going to iterate and build upon that. Automate that. Start there. Because it's not, gee, I have to get to 100% automation. You'll never get there, and the ROI won't be there for you anyway. You want to connect to a continuous process, like what I showed with the circular, doing the Jenkins, doing the testing, doing the regression testing, remediating, going back to the conveyor belt, speeding it up for poor Lucille Ball. And then when I say here, align teams with actionable information, when you're running the test, all that metrics that is available, essentially either from the user experience or from the actual execution of whether it's performance tests or functional tests, all that data is available to you. We've come into some just fascinating test cases. We were doing some user experience testing for a retailer, and their process was they were having some outages on Friday, and they couldn't figure out why. And when we dug into the process of their own user data, and we actually have this running outside, you can dig deep. But they did this on their Facebook page, is they put a coupon that would say, women's clothing and accessories for this particular brand line is going to have a flash sale Friday morning at 8 a.m. It's going to be 40% off at 8 a.m., 30% off at 9, and then dwindling down to 0. But the coupon's only good on Friday at that time, but they put it on the Facebook page on a Sunday. And so what happened all during the week, of course, people that are frequent shoppers there that get the emails that said, hey, go to our Facebook page, they'd be putting things in the cart all week. I'm going to buy a pair of pants. I'm going to buy a shirt. I need accessories. And so Friday would come along, and at 8 a.m., boom, coupon, they want to buy, and the site kept going down. And the data that we actually came up with for them, again, this is from real users, where we went back in time with them over a couple of years. And one test case that wasn't being tested it literally was go to shopping cart, log in, buy. They weren't testing that. Because no one's going to do that. They got to actually pick the items first. Well, they were picking them all week, putting them in the cart. And then on Friday it was boom, boom, done. And the metric that was just mind-boggling to them was 45.7% of their conversions on a weekly basis was with that path. And how many test cases were they running for that one? None. So once we started doing that and running those kind of tests up front and testing it that way, we found what the issues were, fixed them, and it went away. But we don't ever find that unless we have that user data. And we just had all kinds of metrics that are just fascinating about the way people shop and how they shop and the demographics. But that's an example where, marketing's putting something out on Facebook, IT probably totally unaware of it. In this case, they actually were. And then things happening on Friday, IT not knowing why, marketing asking why, but the link was never made until we were actually able to pick the data up. So final takeaway, I've been hitting on it a little bit. Why is continuous integration important? It's speed, it's the conveyor belt, but it's revenue for your brand. It's your brand recognition. I already mentioned that I tweet every time I can't use my mobile boarding pass, and you'd be surprised at the number of people that do that. And then competitive advantage. Amazon one-click's a perfect example. They found a fast way to get revenue, because I'm the same way. If it takes me 6 or 8 clicks to buy something, I'm probably just going to go to Amazon or go somewhere else where it takes only 1 or 2 clicks. But that's a user experience. And you have to know how people are using your app or your site before you're able to take advantage of that. So I'm going to leave you with a trivia. No one yell the answers out here. I'm going to put my Twitter account up there. And for each question, if the first person that tweets to me and says what the answer is, I have a USB cell phone charger that SOASTA gives out. Give me a couple of days to get home and get it back out, and I'll tweet out who the winners are. But the first question that you'd have to answer is, and this is all mobile related, so this is on your phone now. There's a satellite that is very key to mobile right now. It was first launched in the year that this snowstorm hit the city of Boston. Take a real good look at the cars, not the snow. Hint, it was not 2014. How many of them circle the Earth at any one time? That's a number I'm looking for. So that's 3 questions so far. And then the last one, I'll be able to tell if those of you that will be smart enough to know where to go. I worked at one of those 3 companies and actually worked on this. You have to tweet me. So the satellite name, the year, how many, right company. And then you just have to tweet me there. And if you have a Twitter account, I'll follow you back as well. So I'll ask for questions, but go here. There's free downloads. And I write a blog. Pretty much everything I just touched on today that has a blog written about it or a white paper or topic that's available, and a lot deeper dive, whether it's production testing or user experience or whatever topic, or CI actually. I got a couple of them on CI. So any questions? Do we have time for questions? Yep. Good. Oh, Mike.
You talked a bit about testing on physical devices. How do you handle scheduling if you have, say, 5 physical devices and 1,000 tests to run?
So for us, we actually, there's a company we're partnered with called NTT. So we actually, the example I gave about being able to test in the cloud, the infrastructure, we have the equivalent through NTT to be able to spin up as many devices as we need for whatever period of time we spin them up. And we actually offer that to our customers as well, but we do the same thing. And what you find is you don't really need that many devices, because when you have the data, and again, I have it up running over here, you'll find that there's a a 95% cutoff of, really what you do want to do is just test that whatever you want us to draw the line, whether it's 90 or 95. And you'll see most of my customers are 20 devices, 25 devices, some 30, because they've got some interesting requirements that require them to do things a little differently. But we look at the real user data and we draw the line based on that. And then we use the cloud from NTT is the one we use.
They're like spinning up interfaces to iPhones or something?
Yes, they actually have like a data center, like in Amazon, when you spin up servers in the cloud, they have the same thing for mobile. And they've got data centers, I think Japan, Asia, here in the US, so maybe another location I'm missing, but that's what we like them so much because we had to do tests like this that we partner with them and we offer it to our customers. Any other? I hear my phone buzzing, so somebody's sending me something. Over here. Just wait for the mic to ask the question, please.
So if you have a small change that you want to test, like if it's a very small change, so it will have to go to whole of the cycle that from the start to the end. So how do you handle it? Like if it's a trivial thing?
So we do the cycle's the same, regardless of the change, whether it's a one feature change or whether it's one bug fix. Because we test so often, pretty much our style is, hey, if it's ready to go, ship it. Ready to go, keep going. Don't stop the conveyor belt for Lucy. Even though she probably would hate that.
Thank you. How do you measure quality? Do you have any metrics for test coverage, or do you have any Jenkins plugins for test coverage, or how do you do reporting and publishing?
So for test coverage, we do essentially analyze everything, and there's a white paper and a blog on our site that actually I wrote. But we are constantly looking at test coverage and edge cases, and we tie user experience back to that. Obviously there's a place where we feel, hey, here's the criticality, this is where we draw the line, and that's constantly changing. There's no real set. I've had people ask me, well, what percentage of test cases coverage do you have? Is it 100? Is it 80? And then the answer is it's not a number. You got to look at how your users are using your application, and you're constantly evaluating those edge cases. And really your feedback is back into that agile team as the UX role, so that you're feeding how people are using the app, because some things are going to fall off that, hey, I developed all these test cases, this is where my coverage line's going to be, I don't need to do anything. That has to be every cycle and every iteration, you're going to learn something from your user that will change that, not only that line, but maybe something new. I always look at there's some interesting, whenever I'm out walking and you see sidewalks, and all of a sudden I see this beaten path in the grass that's all dirt. That's an example where, hey, great design on the sidewalk, but everybody's figured out they can cut the corner by walking through the grass. That's kind of what you have to watch for as a designer from a test perspective. Hopefully that answer your question. I think one more? No? We good? All right, well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.